Hello, this is Danton again, and we're back with our third lesson on effective communication skills for professionals. So today we're going to be talking about how to handle conflict. So when you have disagreements, when you have maybe a difficult issue that you're having to discuss with someone, what are some effective ways to handle conflict and also to try to make sure that things don't become too emotional? And how can we effectively disagree with others as well? So the first skill we're going to look at is how to disagree. And one of the things that study shows is that the way we disagree is actually really important. Now for many of us, especially using English, we tend to disagree like the first example. I disagree because, and then we give our reasons why we disagree. So we put the disagree at the beginning of the sentence. But research shows that it's actually better if you can reverse the order of this sentence. So rather than putting the disagree at the beginning of the sentence, you would put it at the end and put the reasons first. So basically you're going to change the order here. So in the second example, we see that the reasons why we disagree are given first. That idea doesn't address the main issue and will be difficult to implement. Therefore, I cannot agree. And we put the disagreement part at the end of the sentence. And why would we do this? We do this because whenever we tell someone, I disagree, usually what happens is they don't listen to what you say after that. They're not interested in what you have to say after the disagreement part, because hearing the words, I disagree, or I don't like that idea, or I can't accept that, that usually makes the other person feel quite bad and feel negative. So they're less likely to listen to this explanation of why you disagree. Therefore, it's important to reverse the order, give your reasons why you disagree first, and then at the end you can add, therefore, I cannot agree, therefore I can't accept your idea, therefore I disagree with your idea. So you want to try to reverse the order when you're disagreeing with someone. Now, if you're going to disagree directly, it's possible to disagree directly. Sometimes we might have to do that. But there's a small change we need to make in how we put our sentence together. And that small change involves one word. And the word is using you or your. So if we look at this example, I disagree with you because. In this example, what are we disagreeing to or disagreeing with? We're actually disagreeing with the other person. The other person becomes the target, the main target of our disagreement. So rather than saying it this way, we should change you to the word that. By changing you to that refers to opinion, suggestion, idea. It doesn't refer to a person. But you refers to a person. So you want to take the person out of it. Disagree with ideas, disagree with suggestions, disagree with proposals. That's fine, but try not to disagree with people. Same thing here. Instead of saying your idea, it would be better to say that idea, right? So again, you're taking the person out of it. So whenever you disagree, don't disagree with people, only disagree with ideas and suggestions and opinions. The next one we're going to look at is knee-jerk reactions. Well, what is a knee-jerk reaction? A knee-jerk reaction is a reaction you have without thinking. And knee-jerk reactions often happen in meetings or in discussions when things become a little emotional, or maybe we're tired, we're frustrated, we can't make any progress, we might have a knee-jerk reaction. So some common knee-jerk reactions might be like, that's ridiculous, are you crazy? No way. Or a very common one is no 5 times. And you don't need to say no 5 times, you can just say it once. But this is a common example of a knee-jerk reaction. The term knee-jerk comes from the idea of when you get a physical examination and they want to check the nerves in your knee, actually in your knee, they hit it with a little hammer and your knee will kick up automatically. And this is where we get knee-jerk reaction. It's in a reaction that's automatically coming out without thinking. So what we want to do is when someone says something to us that maybe upsets us or makes us, or we think doesn't make any sense, or it's very frustrating, we still want to give thoughtful consideration to what they're saying. maybe explain to them why we disagree, and then tell them therefore we can't accept what they're saying. We want to avoid these type of sudden, without thinking type of reactions, because what happens is this creates a kind of vicious cycle. If you use an expression like this, they get upset, they're likely to use a similar expression, it gets worse and gets worse, and what happens is your communication process just breaks down. And basically you're going to have communication failure. You're not going to be able to communicate effectively. So you want to try to avoid these knee-jerk reactions. Just be aware that when you're tired and frustrated, these can easily come out. But be patient, have good self-control as you talk to people, and whatever the difficulty is, whatever the problem is, as we mentioned in our first lesson, maintain that positive attitude and just keep working at it. Okay? All right, we're going to move on to the next one, which is the idea of learning the difference between observing behavior and evaluating or judging behavior. So when we say observe, we mean just look at what's happening and describe it as it is. But if we evaluate or judge, we are giving our personal opinion on something, right? So what we want to do is try to avoid evaluation and judging and stick strictly with observation. So let me show you two sentences. John is wearing a nice shirt. Now, would that sentence be an observation or would that be an evaluation? Well, if we look at this sentence, John is wearing a nice shirt, we see that it's an evaluation statement. It's a judgment. Because we're saying what the shirt, how we feel about the shirt, what's our personal opinion about the shirt. But look at the second sentence. John is wearing a blue dress shirt with a white collar. That's not a judgment, that's not an evaluation, it's simply an observation of what I see. I'm just stating the facts. Now for you as a listener, which of these two sentences is more useful to you? Which of these two sentences has more information that helps you understand what John's shirt is like? Obviously, it is the second one. This first sentence is not really that useful to you because it doesn't contain very much information. But the second sentence is much more useful. There's a lot of information here and we know exactly what the shirt looks like. So why is this important in a meeting or a negotiation or when we're having a discussion with someone? It's important because we tend to evaluate people's behavior when we really shouldn't. What we should be doing is just describing the behavior, observing the behavior, describing what we see, but without judging it or evaluating it. So for example, he's not considerate. That's an evaluation, that's a judgment. But the observation might be, he's been late for our meeting 3 times this month. That's a fact. I'm not judging you, I'm not saying you're a bad person because of that. I'm just stating that this is the fact and this is what happened. This sentence, the second one, the observation, is much more useful because it contains actual factual information. The first sentence is not that helpful. Let's look at some other examples. In a meeting or a negotiation, we might hear someone say, you're being unfair, you're not being flexible, you're not being reasonable. Again, these are evaluations, but they're not helpful overall in our communication process. What would be better is to stick to facts. Your proposal only offers one concession. It's just a fact. I'm just observing that is the situation. Or the other example we have is, we have offered 3 concessions, but you only offered 1. If I use the observation statements, then I have a clear understanding of what the problem is, and we can talk about it and we can solve it. But if I add the evaluation statement, it usually just upsets the other person and it makes things become a little bit emotional. So you can just leave out these evaluation statements. Now, of course, I know we're all human, and by instinct, we want to judge and we want to evaluate. Most of us will do both at the same time. Most of us have a habit of saying, he's not considerate because he's been late for our meeting 3 times this month. But in fact, you don't need that first part. It doesn't help, it doesn't add any value to what you're saying, and it doesn't add any more understanding to what you're saying. Let me give you another really simple example of this. As a teacher, if I told one of my students, you're a bad student, what does that mean? What does that communicate to the student? Very little. There's no useful information in that sentence. But if I said to that student, you haven't done your homework this past week, then I've communicated a clear message and we can sit and we can talk about what's happening and we can solve it from there. So you want to try to avoid evaluating people's behavior. I know this is not easy, it takes a lot of practice, but it can be a very effective skill in terms of your communication. So before I conclude this final lecture on effective communication skills, let's just go over what we've talked about so far in terms of handling conflict with others. We talked about how to disagree by putting reasons first and the disagreeing part at the end of your sentence rather than putting disagree at the beginning. That was the first one. The second thing we talked about is don't disagree with people, only disagree with ideas, opinions, and suggestions. So avoid saying things like, I disagree with you, or I disagree with your idea. Rather use that idea, that suggestion, that proposal. And then finally, avoid, if you can, evaluating people's behavior. Try to just observe what they're doing, state the fact, and then talk about it without the evaluation or the judgment. In conclusion, I'd like to suggest something to you that I think will be helpful. We've talked about several different ways of being more effective in our communication. It's going to be very hard to master all of these skills at once. Even for a native speaker, it would be very challenging. So what I'd like to suggest is what I call a 1-month plan to becoming a better communicator. So the idea is that you would choose one skill that we've learned, and for 1 month, you focus only on that skill. You practice that skill until it becomes a habit for you, until it becomes very natural for you. So for example, for 1 month, every time you disagree, try to give your reasons for disagreeing first and put the disagreement at the end of your sentence until that becomes easy for you and natural for you. Once you've done that and you go to the next month, whenever you have a discussion with someone or a meeting, try to use signaling for 1 month. Just focus on practicing signaling. Oh, I have a question about that, or I'd like to make a suggestion. Until again, that becomes natural and quite easy for you. Active listening. We talked about active listening where you want to summarize the main point of what someone has said and repeat it back to them. For 1 month, focus on just active listening until it becomes easy and natural for you. And then go to the next month. Maybe this month you're trying to observe and not evaluate. Practice that for 1 month. Of course, it's going to take time, but over the course of several months, what's going to happen is your communication skills will improve. And it will become quite easy and natural because it will become a habit because you've taken 1 month and you've practiced one skill. In conclusion, I'd just like to say that it's easy to talk. Everyone can talk. Nobody has a problem talking, and talking is simple. But talking and communicating are not the same thing. Talking is just making noise and saying words, but to be an effective communicator is something you have to develop, you have to work on it, and it requires effort. So I just want to leave you with that. Thank you very much, and this concludes our final lesson. Bye.